When you walk away from someone, their brain doesn't just register disappointment. It triggers a full neurobiological crisis that's been hardwired into humans for thousands of years. Here's what's actually happening inside their head. The moment they realize you're gone, their brain floods with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It's the same chemical cocktail your ancestors experienced when separated from their tribe in the wilderness. But here's where it gets fascinating. Their brain literally can't tell the difference between emotional pain and physical injury. When you check someone's brain scans during heartbreak, the same regions light up as when they're experiencing a broken bone. Think about that for a moment. Your departure doesn't just hurt their feelings. Their nervous system is screaming danger, as if their survival depends on getting you back. And honestly, we've all been there. You know that feeling when someone stops responding to your texts, and suddenly you're checking your phone every 30 seconds like it holds the secrets of the universe? That's not neediness. That's your mammalian brain trying to solve what it perceives as a life-threatening problem. This is why logical advice falls flat during heartbreak. You can't reason with a nervous system that thinks it's fighting for survival. The beautiful irony? This intense response often has nothing to do with how much they actually valued the relationship. It's about how their brain interprets abandonment itself. Chapter 1. The Attachment System, Hijack. Your decision to leave doesn't just affect their present moment. It hijacks their entire attachment system, dragging up patterns that were formed before they could even walk. Every person develops an attachment style in childhood, and your departure activates whichever survival strategy they learned at age 3. If they have anxious attachment, they'll cling harder. We're talking full detective mode, analyzing your last conversation like it's the Zapruder film, reaching out through mutual friends, maybe even showing up places they know you'll be. It's not romantic persistence. It's their nervous system trying to restore safety through proximity. If they're avoidantly attached, plot twist, they might seem completely unfazed while internally experiencing absolute chaos. These are often the people who text you 6 months later at 2 a.m. because they've been processing your departure in slow motion this whole time. And here's what nobody talks about. The people who seem most together after a breakup are often the ones whose attachment system is screaming the loudest. They just learned early that showing need was dangerous, so they perform independence while secretly hoping you'll notice how well they're doing without you. The attachment system doesn't care about logic. It only cares about survival. And for millions of years, being left by your tribe meant you wouldn't survive. That Instagram story they posted immediately after you left, that's not moving on. That's their attachment system, trying to signal they're still valuable to the group. Chapter 2. Loss aversion in action. Here's a psychological principle that explains why your departure hits them like a freight train. Humans feel losses approximately twice as intensely as equivalent gains. This isn't drama, it's hardwired psychology. Think about it. When you first got together, there was excitement, butterflies, that new relationship energy. Pleasant, right? But when you leave, they're not just losing those good feelings. They're experiencing the psychological equivalent of losing twice that value. It's like emotional bankruptcy. This is why people become obsessed with getting closure or working things out after someone leaves. Their brain is desperately trying to avoid registering the loss as final because the psychological cost feels unbearable. And here's where it gets beautifully human. They'll often convince themselves that fighting for the relationship is about love, when it's actually about loss aversion. Their brain is literally calculating that any effort to avoid the loss is worth it, even if the relationship was mediocre. Ever wonder why people suddenly become the perfect partner right after you decide to leave? That's loss aversion in overdrive. They're not actually changing. They're making desperate calculations to avoid the psychological cost of losing what they had. The cruel irony? This intense focus on avoiding loss often prevents them from seeing that letting go might actually be the gain they need. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to someone is losing something they were holding on to too tightly. Chapter 3. The Idealization Trap. When you walk away, something strange happens to their memory. Suddenly, you become perfect. This isn't nostalgia. It's a psychological defense mechanism called idealization, and it serves a very specific purpose. Their brain starts editing your relationship like a highlight reel. All the frustrations, incompatibilities, and genuine reasons you left, those get filed away, while every good moment gets enhanced and replayed on loop. This happens because acknowledging the relationship's real problems would mean accepting that losing it might actually be beneficial, and loss aversion won't allow that calculation. So instead, their mind reconstructs you as the perfect partner who got away. You know what's fascinating? The worse the relationship actually was, the more intense this idealization becomes. People in genuinely healthy relationships that end amicably rarely experience this level of fantasy revision. But toxic relationships? Those get rewritten as epic love stories. It's like their brain becomes a romance novelist, conveniently forgetting every argument while remembering that one time you brought them soup when they were sick. Here's the part that might surprise you. This idealization isn't really about you at all. It's about them avoiding the psychological work of examining why they stayed in something that wasn't working. Idealizing you is easier than facing their own patterns. The version of you they're missing isn't who you actually were. It's who they needed you to be to avoid looking at themselves. And that's why explaining your reasons for leaving rarely helps. You're arguing with a fantasy, not a memory. Chapter 4. Defense mechanisms activate. When you decide to leave, you're not just ending a relationship. You're triggering their psychological defense system, and it's about to get creative. Defense mechanisms are like emotional airbags. They deploy automatically to protect the ego from impact, even when the crash is inevitable. First up, rationalization. Oh, they were never right for me anyway. This one's particularly entertaining, because they'll retroactively discover deal breakers they never mentioned while you were together. Suddenly, you're too ambitious, not ambitious enough, too social, too introverted. Basically whatever explains why losing you is actually a win. Then there's projection. They're probably just scared of commitment. This is their psyche's way of making your departure about your flaws, rather than facing the possibility that you simply didn't want to be with them. It's emotionally safer to assume you're broken than to question their own lovability. My personal favorite is denial, where they act like the breakup is just a temporary misunderstanding that will obviously resolve itself once you come to your senses. But here's what's really happening underneath all this psychological theater. Their sense of self is fragmenting. Part of their identity was built around being your person, and your departure creates an existential crisis they're not equipped to handle directly. Defense mechanisms aren't character flaws, they're emergency protocols. The problem is they prevent the real healing work that could actually help them grow. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's psychological defense system. Chapter 5. The bargaining mind games. After the initial shock wears off, their brain enters negotiation mode, and the bargaining phase of losing you can get remarkably creative. This is where logic goes out the window, because they start making deals with the universe, with you, and with themselves that would make a used car salesman proud. Internal bargaining sounds like, if I just give them space for exactly 2 weeks, they'll realize they miss me. Or, if I become the person they wanted me to be, they'll come back. Their mind creates elaborate scenarios where the right combination of actions will reverse your decision to leave. But external bargaining? That's where things get interesting. Grand gestures, unexpected gifts, sudden lifestyle changes they swore they'd never make. It's like watching someone try to solve an emotional puzzle. Except the puzzle is actually a mirror. Here's what's really happening. They're trying to regain control over a situation where they have none. The bargaining isn't about winning you back. It's about avoiding the powerlessness of acceptance. The most heartbreaking part, all this energy they're spending trying to change the outcome could be redirected toward changing themselves. But that requires accepting that you're actually gone. Some people get stuck in bargaining for months or even years, constantly adjusting their strategy instead of processing their loss. They become relationship strategists instead of healers. The bargaining only ends when they finally understand that love isn't a negotiation. It's either freely given or it's not love at all. That's when the real healing can finally begin. Want to level up your people skills? Join our YouTube membership for early access to scripts, input on future topics, and connection with a community that gets the social struggle. Click join below, and let's master human interaction together. Chapter 6. Social Identity Crisis. Your departure doesn't just affect their personal world, it shatters their social identity. And suddenly they're facing the question, who am I when I'm not your person? Relationships become part of our social DNA. We're not just individuals, we're half of a unit. And when you leave, they're left holding pieces of an identity that no longer makes sense. Think about how couples become we in conversation. We love that restaurant. We're planning a trip. We think. When you leave, they have to relearn how to be I again, and it's more disorienting than you might expect. Then there's the social awkwardness tsunami. Mutual friends don't know how to navigate the new dynamic. Whose side are they on? Can they still invite both of you to things? Suddenly, your shared social circle becomes a diplomatic minefield. And they're trying to maintain relationships while processing the fact that half their social proof just walked away. But here's the deeper layer. Their social identity was partly built on being chosen by you. Your selection validated their worth to the group. So your departure doesn't just mean losing a partner. It means losing social evidence of their value. This is why rebound relationships happen so quickly sometimes. It's not about replacing you emotionally. It's about restoring their social identity as someone who is wanted. The beautiful irony? This identity crisis, as painful as it is, often forces them to rediscover who they actually are underneath all the couple dynamics. Sometimes losing your social identity is the first step toward finding your authentic self. Chapter 7. Power Dynamics Shift. When you decide to walk away, you're not just ending a relationship, you're completely restructuring the power dynamic, and that shift can be psychologically devastating for the person left behind. Every relationship has an invisible power structure, and the person who cares less typically has more control. By leaving, you've just shifted all the power to yourself. Suddenly, they're in the position of wanting something they can't have, from someone who no longer wants to give it. This role reversal can be especially jarring if they were used to being the one with more power in the relationship. Watch what happens next. They'll often try to reassert control through the only means they have left: emotional manipulation, threats, promises, or sometimes even attempting to make you jealous. But here's the deeper psychological truth. Losing power in a relationship can trigger a complete ego crisis. Part of their self-worth was built on their ability to influence you, to be important to your emotional world. Your departure doesn't just say, "I don't want this relationship." It says, "You don't have power over me anymore." This is why some people become vindictive after being left. It's not about the relationship anymore. It's about trying to prove they still have some influence over your emotional state. The most psychologically healthy response? Accepting the power shift with dignity. But that requires a level of self-awareness and emotional maturity that not everyone possesses in moments of loss. True power comes from being able to let go of someone gracefully, even when every instinct is screaming to hold on. That's the difference between reacting and responding. Chapter 8. The Growth Paradox. Here's the most counterintuitive part about someone's response to you leaving. Your departure might be exactly what they need for their personal evolution, even though it feels like destruction. Growth often requires crisis, and losing someone significant creates the perfect conditions for psychological transformation that might never have happened otherwise. When you're in a relationship, it's easy to become comfortable, to stop pushing yourself, to let your partner fill the gaps in your emotional development. Your departure forces them to confront parts of themselves they've been avoiding. Suddenly, they have to learn emotional regulation skills they outsourced to you. They have to rediscover their own interests, rebuild their social connections, and most importantly, develop a relationship with themselves. But here's where it gets beautifully ironic. The people who handle being left with the most grace are often the ones who needed the relationship least. And the people who fall apart completely? They're usually the ones who most needed to learn how to stand on their own. This is why rebounds rarely work long-term. They're trying to skip the growth phase and get back to the comfort of couplehood without doing the individual work. The growth paradox is this: losing you might hurt them tremendously in the short term, but it could save them from a lifetime of emotional dependency and stunted personal development. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's emotional immaturity. Chapter 9. Time and Memory Distortion. When you walk away, you don't just leave their present. You completely reorganize their relationship with time itself, and the psychological effects are more profound than you might imagine. Memory becomes a weapon against healing, because their brain starts playing highlight reels on repeat while filing away anything that justified your departure. The past gets reconstructed as this golden era of perfect love, conveniently edited to remove every argument, every moment of incompatibility, every reason you actually left. It's like their mind becomes a romance movie editor, keeping only the scenes that support the narrative of tragic loss. But here's where time distortion gets really interesting. They lose the ability to imagine a future without you. Plans you made together become impossible dreams. Goals that involved you feel meaningless. Their future, which once felt expansive and exciting, suddenly contracts to the size of their grief. And the present? The present becomes unbearable because it's the only timeline where you're actually gone. So they escape into idealized memories or fantasy futures where you come back. This is why people say time heals all wounds. It's not that time makes the loss less significant. It's that time eventually forces them to rebuild their relationship with past, present, and future around a reality that doesn't include you. The healing happens when they stop trying to live in the relationship's ghost and start building a life in the present moment. That's when they finally understand the difference between remembering love and being haunted by it. Chapter 10. The Healing Opportunity. Here's what most people miss about the devastation of being left. Hidden within all that psychological chaos is the greatest opportunity for personal transformation they may ever receive. Rock bottom becomes a foundation, but only if they're willing to build something new instead of trying to reconstruct what was. The pain of your departure forces them to ask questions they've been avoiding. Why do I attract unavailable people? What am I actually looking for in a relationship? How much of my identity depends on being validated by someone else? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're the ones that create real change. This is where post-traumatic growth becomes possible. The same psychological systems that made your departure feel catastrophic can be redirected toward building a stronger, more authentic version of themselves. But here's the key. Healing requires them to stop trying to go back to who they were before you left. That person is gone. The question becomes, who do they want to become in light of what they've learned? Some people use this opportunity to develop emotional intelligence, to learn about attachment styles, to practice self-compassion. Others use it to build the kind of life that would attract genuinely compatible partners. The most beautiful transformation? When they eventually thank you for leaving because they realize it forced them to become the person they were always meant to be. That's when your departure becomes their liberation. Understanding what people feel when you walk away isn't about taking responsibility for their emotional reactions. It's about recognizing the profound psychological forces you set in motion when you choose yourself. You're not responsible for managing someone else's attachment system, but understanding it can help you navigate the aftermath with more compassion and better boundaries. When they're cycling through denial, bargaining, anger, and grief, remember, these aren't character flaws. They're normal human responses to perceived abandonment. Their reaction intensity isn't necessarily proportional to how much they valued the relationship. It's proportional to how their nervous system interprets loss. This means their desperate attempts to reconnect, their angry outbursts, their social media stalking, their attempts to make you jealous. None of this is really about you. It's about them processing the psychological earthquake of being left. Your job isn't to minimize their pain by staying in something that doesn't serve you. Your job is to honor your own truth while maintaining appropriate compassion for their journey. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is hold firm boundaries while someone learns to regulate their own emotions. Sometimes, walking away is the gift that forces someone to finally grow up. The ultimate truth? You can't love someone into emotional maturity. You can't stay to prevent their growth, and you definitely can't sacrifice your own well-being to manage theirs. Walking away isn't cruel when staying would be crueler to both of you. Choose yourself, not from selfishness, but from the understanding that authentic love can only exist between two people who are whole on their own. Learned something new? Hit that like button, share it with others, tap subscribe, and stick around for more. Got thoughts? I'd love to hear them in the comments.